and that your message is important. And it's essential that you believe in the value of yourself and what you have to say, and that no matter how you deliver it, no matter what you take away from the session, it is important that you speak up and you speak your truth. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk a little bit about what you think about public speaking and what speakers you admire, what you find important, what you value. We'll talk about 3 elements of public speaking to help you gain some practice and some kind of tactical knowledge that you can take with you. And then we'll also talk about how you can develop your personal style, some exercises you can use. And, just as we admire a lot of different public speakers, it's important to see what you add to the conversation, what your special sauce is as a public speaker, and take the time to develop that. And that is another way to kind of help you develop confidence by looking at your personal strengths and investing in them. I think one of my favorite public speakers, and I know somebody who's very close to TMC, is Tammy Duckworth. And one thing that I really love about her is obviously she has a phenomenal story and she has some really wonderful quotable moments like, I know from personal experience that engaging with your community and helping others foster a sense of shared sacrifice, and at a time when our politics seem more focused on tearing us apart than bringing us together, that shared sacrifice will help us rekindle the national unity that has made us the strongest nation in the world. So I know that service projects are a major part of TMC's DNA. I know you've participated in them. I know that some of you have gotten to meet Tammy Duckworth, which is really fantastic. And part of our sacrifice, part of our shared sacrifice is in sharing our stories, right? Sharing the experience that we have, that especially for a group of veterans, you all have similar stories and similar experiences, but they're all unique, right? Even your experiences among each other are unique. And then when you go out into the world, you're sharing stories, maybe they're stories of your military time, but maybe it's something else. Maybe it's through the lens of being a veteran. All of that is unique and important, and it is a form of sacrifice, and it is a form of service. She also has a quote that we have here about how female service members are so integrated into the military, so critical and vital to all functions of the military, from combat service support to direct combat, that we could not go to war as a nation. We could not defend America without our women. So, as we kind of go through the journey of your public speaking self, it's really, really important to think about yourself from all of these different lenses. Sometimes we think about ourselves as, well, I'm a woman, so I have, these particular challenges in front of me to be listened to, or I'm a veteran, and so maybe there are, some differences that I need to overcome with my audience. And intersectionality, that's a good point, right? There's an intersectionality in our personalities where we have all of these different selves that intersect and combine to make a really, really unique experience. And all of that is essential to help other people understand something that they otherwise wouldn't have a connection to, right? A lot of people don't have experiences with the military. My family is, we don't have U.S. veterans in our family. So being able to understand what military experience is like from you is a really wonderful way to kind of create some bridges and create connections that we otherwise wouldn't have. So that's a very essential part of what you can play. With these TMC service projects, one that was brought up recently was, I heard really great things about Hope Manor Joliet. Was anybody here at Hope Manor? Anybody on the call? Yeah. Does anybody want to talk about some of the stories that you might have heard or how impactful the stories were? You can feel free to jump in. Or, yeah, all of us. Okay, that's great that everybody made it. Yeah. Marina, did you want to talk about it at all, or anybody else want to raise their hand?
Oh, sure, definitely. It was a great. I liked the team part of it, where we were all in different teams, and I loved watching right after the team that was doing the outdoor furniture, right after we built it. The people sat on it maybe like 2 minutes after we were done. It was so great to see that, and it made me feel really, really happy because we made something that they used right away. And then the other teams, like all the We did I think we did a fantastic job. I mean, it looks so beautiful by the time we left, and I'm just so proud of everybody.
Oh, that's so fantastic. And that's, I think, what a great point, right? That being able to put your hands on something and create something that you immediately see being used is really important. I found a YouTube video of some residents at Hope Manor Joliet, and they were talking about how much the residence has meant to them as a place of transition, as a place of comfort, as a place of being able to renew themselves after something really difficult. You know, some people have experienced great losses or have experienced a lot of instability. You know, and obviously you know the stories and you've heard them, but you know, I think it's such a wonderful reminder as we think about the stories that we're going to tell each other, how much it mattered to hear the stories of the people who you helped, right? And that you guys all got to experience that together, I think is really fantastic. So let's take a moment, speaking of stories and public speakers and storytelling. I wanted to ask as a group, who are some speakers that you admire and what are some qualities that you admire about them? And again, I'm a bit new to, let's see. Uh, Okay, I see a chat that just came up, and I'm sorry that I'm not able to see the conversation. All the paint crews inside and outside, landscaping crew, everyone did so awesome. That is fantastic. I love the collaboration. Comedians are fantastic. Amber, are there any comedians in particular who you admire? All right, Cat Williams, I see Chris Rock, I see Michelle Obama. Yes, Michelle Obama is a favorite of mine as well. President Obama, absolutely. I've gotten Brene Brown. I've gotten a lot of, I think in the past it's been, Elon Musk. I see Dave Chappelle. And it's interesting. Why do we associate comedians with public speaking? All the TMC ambassadors have been great. That's fantastic. Mel Robbins, yep. Toni Morrison, one of my favorite authors. Yeah, Amber, yeah. Did you raise your hand?
Yes. I figured it'd be faster if I talked.
Yes.
So comedy is very difficult to deliver. And public speaking as it is, like even if it's just a regular presentation, being a dynamic speaker that captures the audience attention is terrifying for people who, haven't done it regularly. And then to be a comedian, to have the comedic timing, and then I'll also be able to engage your audience. It's to me, it's absolutely magical. And my other favorite comedian is Joe Coy. So to
Mhm.
make these universal jokes and be able to like hit the timing and be related, like be relatable and like actually make people think, I think it's a fantastic art.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think one thing that I think comedians do really well. So in the past with the TMC, I've also done storytelling classes. And I think what comes up a lot with storytelling, because that was brought up in the survey too, public speaking and storytelling are very, very linked, is the element of surprise, right? Comedy kind of catches us off guard a little bit, right? It kind of takes us in one direction and then, makes a right turn or a left turn. And it's a really good way to hold, like you said, hold attention. And I think with comedians, and in particular with storytelling, what we see a lot is the story kind of gets the meaning across without a lot of like lecturing, right? So kind of you put the medicine in the chocolate, right? So I think there's a really nice way for comedians, and I appreciate that so many are being brought up, that comedians are held to this great standard of public speaking because they're able to use a lot of different styles. I mean, all of the comedians that were listed have very different styles, but they're all able to utilize, like you said, humor, the element of surprise, the element of storytelling to be able to get a really, important point across. Um, Somebody also mentioned somebody that they said was a little bit niche. LTG Potter. Morgan, do you mind talking a little bit about this person? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, she's not super well known outside of the Army intelligence community, but any other former Army intel loves her. She is a really dynamic public speaker, and she's one of these people who isn't very flustered when someone you question her assessment or she's challenging your assessment. She's able to very much like keep her cool and continue to give like a really competent and coherent presentation. She's always super knowledgeable, and she's also very like responsive to feedback.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we're going to talk about that too. And you raised some really good points. This was brought up in the survey too, that there is even among the speakers or even among the cohort who are confidence speakers, sometimes there's that question of how do I recover, right? What do I do to recover from if I get distracted or if somebody asks me a question or if I kind of just get a little bit out of my lane. So we'll talk about that in a little while. But you bring up something that's really important, which is that no matter what, there's a sense of I think respect and dignity with a lot of speakers who are not necessarily comedians, but they're still very, very good public speakers, right? There's a sense of warmth. There's a sense of, you said, being receptive to feedback. And I think somebody had also mentioned in the survey charisma. And I hear the word charisma a lot. There's actually a book about, or many books about charisma, but there's one book that breaks it down into charisma being 3 parts, which is warmth, credibility, and presence. So when we think about public speakers and charisma, it sounds like, is it Lieutenant General Potter?
Yep, that's her.
Okay. Is really adept at kind of evoking that charisma with, it sounds like, a lot of warmth, credibility, and presence. So even if you're not necessarily funny, I don't want anybody to walk away here thinking that you have to be a comedian to be a great public speaker. But if you're able to evoke those qualities that, that Morgan mentioned, that, we've been talking about, I think that goes a really long way to creating some affinity with the audience and also improving your own confidence and your ability to recover, because you're thinking of the audience in terms of being kind of more collaborative than something to be afraid of or something to like worry about. I think somebody's raised their hand, so let me just take a look at that. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry if I'm missing a hand raise. Amber and Trisha?
I'm Trisha.
Hi, Trisha.
I was just gonna say, like, for me, J.R. Martinez, Danny Trejo, Dolores Huerta, and like Cesar Chavez.
Mm-hmm.
My hand down.
That I admire. It's because of what they've gone through and their adversities, and like J.R. Martinez literally could have been any of us that are on here that are combat veterans. So for me, with public speakers, I like somebody that I have something in common with or that I can identify with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge point, right? Public speaking can convey any emotion, and sometimes it's dealing with a lot of adversity, right? And that's a major part of connective energy, is being vulnerable and sharing a sense of, a journey that can be very difficult, but that may also relate to other people. And we'll talk a little bit about how some of the practices that I'll suggest later can help us when we're telling a vulnerable story, which I think some of you may. That can be very difficult. And it's important to draw boundaries for yourself so that as you tell a story or as you share something with the public or answer questions, you're able to kind of make sure that it's a comfortable experience for you. But when people do share those stories, I'm sorry, was that Trisha who's just speaking?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thank you. Like Trisha was saying, it sounds like something that she feels an affinity for because they have that in common. So I appreciate that, thank you. And I think, Amber, you had your hand raised, somebody said?
Sorry, I can't figure out how to take it down.
Okay.
I mean, I figured it out. I just don't be obedient.
Well, I'm sorry, now you are obligated to ask a question because your hand is up, so no, I'm just kidding. But if anybody has any other questions, please feel free. And in the meantime, we will move on to the elements that we'll talk about today. So I want you to think about public speaking in 3 different areas of your practice. So the first is your mind, kind of getting yourself set mentally, your voice. Some of the survey responses were talking about being concerned about filler words or kind of making sure that when they speak, it's in an interesting way. And then we'll also talk about your body and kind of thinking about your presence on stage, if you're on a stage, or ways to kind of make yourself more comfortable. And, again, one thing I really want to emphasize is that everybody's style is going to be very different, and that some of the things that we may be concerned about, they're all legitimate, but they may not be as important as we think they are when it comes to delivering our message. So be easy on yourself, and let's go ahead and dive in. So the first piece here is I want to break into a couple of groups. If we can break into groups of 4, I think that would be ideal. And I want you to talk for a few minutes about when you've experienced your best self and what your best self felt like. Okay, so let's take a minute to get into those rooms, and then we'll take 5 minutes to chat.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
It says Andrew for your name, so and I forgot your
I
name.
know Andrew. Andrew is my husband's name.
I figured.
So I am, like I said, I am just not used to teams. So if you guys want to call me Andrew, I'm
No.
I'm fine with that. But yeah, my name is Ritija. So
Khadija, okay.
if that's not coming up, I apologize.
No worries. Excuse me for interrupting, but Janet, there are like 4 people that say they're stuck in a waiting room.
Oh,
And
you see,
so I just wanted to notify you of that. I don't know if you saw the chat, but there's like 4
I
ladies.
didn't.
you see.
So
I don't
apologies
see
for
them
the interruption.
anymore.
They're not
No,
waiting
no problem.
anymore.
Thank you for letting us know. I hope that they're either in the meeting, because I know your alumni leaders have been helping me out with getting folks into the room, Rena. So hopefully they're either in the room, or if something happened and they left out or something happened, they'll come back. But we are monitoring, but I appreciate you calling that out.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that.
No
No, thank you
problem.
for saying that. All right.
And Ratisha, how long for this first breakout room?
If we can start with maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll do a check and see if people still need a few more minutes, then I think that would be a good place to start.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Stand by. This is officially my second time doing this. All right.
You're a pro.
We shall see. All right. Oh, people, we got this. We got this, folks. All right. It's opening now, Ratisha.
Thank you. Great. Okay. Do we have to individually? Oh, no, it's doing it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for doing
I
that.
think there might be like an accept. Oh, no problem.
My
Your
gosh.
slides look great.
Oh, thank you. I would have had no, I'm looking at this and I would have had no idea how to do the room creation. Seeing it at all.
And I can't figure out how to get to a room if I'm on my phone.
I may have to, let me see if I can. Was that Rena? Was that you, Chief?
Yeah, that's me.
Let me see if I can put you in a room. Is everyone having the same concern? Are y'all on your phone and trying to figure out how to get into a room, maybe?
Yes, I am. I know.
Who is that?
Laura, I'm happy that it's not just my technological ineptness.
Oh, we're not gonna blame that at all. So I default to blaming the technology, but if there's a technology person on the phone, they probably are going to be upset with me for saying that. Let's see. How can I
we need to
assign
just switch
y'all
over
to
to
a
Zoom.
room?
We need to switch over to Zoom and stop this Teams nonsense. Teams
Well,
is just
we're
not the
almost done.
business.
We've made it. We have made it this far. Okay. We had one bad incident on Zoom and it scared us away, but we have been persevering over here on hold on, I really have to concentrate. I can't talk and figure out how to get y'all rooms at the same time. Stand by. It says assign participants, right?
You know, oh, sorry. I have a button at the top that says join room. Is anybody else seeing a join room?
I don't have one.
Okay.
Pradesh, I don't have one.
You don't? Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I will say I clicked a button to try to help and I kicked myself out. So I'm gonna probably not do that again. We only have a few people in here. Do we want to try to have the discussion in here?
I was just gonna say that too.
Yeah. Okay. So I am happy to listen.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to be discussing?
So we're discussing what are some moments that you felt like your best self and what did your best self feel like?
Ooh, I got a good one for that.
Yeah?
It's a story I used when I was doing stuff for the Commit Foundation. It's another a nonprofit where they asked a very similar question.
Mhm.
One of the times where I felt my most myself was we were on deployment and we had stopped in a little country called East Timor.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Cool.
and you probably know, you probably heard about. So East Timor was attacked by the Indonesians. They killed all their men and raped all their women and just took their children and just to try to destroy the country and make them fall back under the Indonesian government. And while we were there, we were being escorted. So I was in the Navy. We were being escorted by our a detachment of Marines. To make a long story short, the Marine guys all had camelbacks on, and it was so hot. I mean, I must have chugged like 3 liter bottled water, and not I didn't go to the bathroom at all. And I knew these guys had to be thirsty, but no one was thinking about them. So I started grabbing up a bunch of liter bottles and walked around to each of the different guys that was in our perimeter and filling up their water bottles, their camelbacks with water. And I think that was kind of like the start of me knowing that I needed to be of service to my fellow brothers and sisters.
Oh, that's really beautiful. That's, I mean, almost, I mean, you're literally filling the cup of your neighbors, right? I mean, that's so beautiful. And what made, I mean, I think we can all intuit this, but can you verbalize why that made you feel like your best self?
I think it has to do just with that is how I feed my own soul, is to be of service to others,
Mhm.
is to help others, and that in turn helps me. If that makes sense.
Right. It sounds like you were doing something that was in alignment with your core values and your core self, right? You were doing something that was very authentic to something that you deeply value. So it sounds that's very, very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else have any moments that they want to share? I mean, that was so beautiful. So I don't think, you know, we're all gonna have very different moments, but anything that we want to share. Yes. Oh, sorry, I thought somebody went off mute.
I can share something.
Yeah.
So I used to be the administrator for education for the VA here in Colorado. And one of the classes that I was co-facilitating was called Own the Moment. It's patient-centric care, and it's a 3.5-hour class.
Mhm.
And I had the most Murphy laws of days ever. I had to teach 300 people the principles of patient-centered care, and my co-facilitator didn't show up. Then the power went out, and I still had to teach that class without PowerPoint, without power, without a co-facilitator. And because I was so passionate and I had taught that class so many times, and we would switch roles, that way nobody got too comfortable with just doing one side. So I ended up turning into a one-woman show for 3.5 hours
Oh my
in the
God.
dark. And in order for them to like access the videos that would have been in the PowerPoint, I made them pull up their phones and Google or YouTube the videos and have them watch it in groups.
Mhm.
And I managed to still conclude the class at the 3.5-hour mark. And
Oh,
at
wow.
the end, I got like a standing ovation. And I was just so exhausted, but so proud of myself, like that I was able to power through with everything just going wrong in that day.
That is amazing. That's like you lived one of my literal worst nightmares. That's fantastic that you had the grit and the resilience to make it through and give them a great experience. That's amazing. What in particular for you made it feel like that was uh, evocative of your best self?
I think that it's my passion.
Hmm.
Like being a veteran, I own part of the need to have great healthcare for my brothers and sisters who also get healthcare there. And so I feel like my passion overrode any kind of fear, any kind of anxiety or worry, because I knew how powerful and important that class was. Like I feel like that's what really overrode everything and got me through the whole entire ordeal.
Hmm. Absolutely. And what I really love about both you and Marina telling your stories is as you said, your passion, right? The passion that's coming through as you're telling these stories that really do show how committed you are to your values, how committed you are to your fellow veterans, and, you know, in your case specifically, to providing health care for them. And it's really, really great to hear this and hear your experiences and how much they reveal to you about yourself. That's really fantastic. I'd love to hear, I don't mean to call on people like calling them out, but I would love to hear from maybe Phyllis or Sarome, Laura, Lady C, Kijafa. Does anybody want to volunteer their experience?
I'd be happy to volunteer an experience that I can recall.
Wonderful. I don't know who's speaking. Is that Laura?
It is, and I'm eating dinner. I had another meeting right before this, which is why I'm not on camera. As soon as I finish on camera, but I didn't.
No, thank you for joining, even with dinner. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. But I served as vice president for operations for a college here in the Lawrenceville area. I was on the team that actually built the university, the first one in the state in about 120 years. And so one of the areas that was under my purview was the area of commencement, which I loved. The whole purpose of the entire educational enterprise is to be there at the moment that these students conclude their academic journeys. But in one instance, and we'd had a number of years where we were growing rapidly, so every single semester we were altering where the commencement was being held because we had to grow and expand the experience. So we were up to about 10,000 attendees. We had about 3,200 graduates. And we had a tornado. We were having it on the campus of the university, of college. And then we had a tornado warning that morning. So within a 2-hour period, I had to move with teams almost 15 to 15,000 people, including staff and faculty, from the campus of Georgia Gwinnett College over to the Georgia Gwinnett Arena, and do that in a 3-hour period because we refused to cancel the commencement exercise. So that challenged probably every single thing I ever thought I knew, could do, had learned, had imagined, was afraid of. But it was such a rewarding experience to see everyone come together, work as a team to be able to do that, but to lead that initiative and then to recognize how confident I could be in a situation where it seemed almost impossible to accomplish. Was a wonderful experience, but also to just witness how wonderful it is. And I know we all feel military.
Just kidding.
Together. But anyway, it was great.
Trisha, I'll text you.
So hey, everybody. Thank you for coming on back. I hope you guys had some great conversations. Laura, I'm so sorry. I know we had to cut that a little bit short, it looks like, but I wanted to say I love that story. I mean, literally, it's what you described sounds basically impossible. So what an incredible feat to be able to do that. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much. I wanted to just get a quick pulse check for people. Was that enough time for people to chat with each other, or did we need a little bit more time? Feel like that was enough time? Okay, great. Thank you. So I wanted to, I'm sorry. It looks like a couple people, it looks like at least one person got stuck. Ayana, we'll make sure you're in a group next time, okay? I think with teams, sometimes it just is not, for me, I had to add myself manually. So the different experience it looks like. So with everybody who was able to have a conversation in a group, I wanted to get your sense of, were there any common themes around what helped people feel like their best self? Was there anything that you noticed as people were sharing their stories or their experiences? I see Sean has a hand raised. Sean, do you want to share?
Yeah, the common theme for my group was feeling your best when you've prepared, meaning you've rehearsed gone over what you're going to say, and also maybe writing it down on note cards.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll actually talk a little bit about that in a few minutes as well. So that's a great point. Annette, I see. Annette,
Yes.
Julie, and then Margaret.
So
I shared with my group that I've been publicly speaking for 30 years. However, I still get extremely nervous and anxious. And they say it'll go away with time. No, it doesn't. Stop lying to me. It doesn't go away. It happens. So I would like to hear any advice that anybody has to kind of help quell that, because I actually, my whole body will start shaking. And I don't know why. I just don't. I can be very knowledgeable on my material, or I can make it sound like I'm very knowledgeable if I'm not. But I don't know why I get so, my adrenaline just starts running like crazy. So
Absolutely.
help.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So let's table best self for a second, because I think this is a really important point and I want to make sure we don't overlook this. So I can't tell you that we can make all of the fear go away. I don't think that's realistic. But I think that sometimes, at least for me, reframing is really helpful. I'll be really honest as well. I don't get nervous public speaking. I think it's because I have a lot of experience with my mom as a public speaker, and she always enjoyed it because I think, as I mentioned, my family is a family of immigrants. And so the only time she was ever really able to connect with other people was when she was able to kind of tell her story, right? Because people always looked at her like she was so different, because she was. But, when she was able to share a story about her cooking or her family, or, something really mundane that made it really obvious that we're actually very similar, that's where she felt a lot more comfort and connection. So she got a lot of joy out of public speaking. And I think for me, it always felt like public speaking was an opportunity to connect, not as an opportunity to be judged. And I think that's where sometimes that fear comes in. I think when we approach an audience, when we approach public speaking, we feel a little bit like we're under some scrutiny and that people are looking at us maybe negatively. And I would counter that. I've actually never felt or experienced anything like that. I'm sure there have been people in the audience who judged me, but I'm not speaking for them. I'm speaking to the people who want to connect with me, right? When I go to a seminar, when I came here tonight, I was so excited to speak to you, because what I believe on the other end of the computer is a group of people who believe that I have something valuable to say, and they really hope I deliver it, right? You are here with the hope that I'm going to make this time useful for you. So it's my job to be prepared and to give that to you, right? I don't think you're here judging my hair or judging, but some of you might be, and that's okay. But even if you're judging all of that, if I'm telling you something that at the end of the day helps you become a better public speaker, then I think that's probably a success for all of us, right? So I think the fear is probably going to be there. I think the shaking and everything, I think there's a sense of, where is that coming from? Is that from a fear of judgment? And is there a way to believe that the audience is actually on your side? Does that help? Oh, and I see, Annette, did you want to respond to that, Annette?
Sure. I don't know that I feel like I'm being judged, but I did write it down, to make myself a little note card that says you're not being judged, because I have something of value to tell somebody. So maybe just reframing it and putting it in that context, because I do know that the information I have, it's valuable information, but I know it's valuable for me. So maybe the question is my belief in, is it valuable for you? Because one of the things I shared in my group is I have a little bit of a fear that I'm going to scare people with what it is I'm going to talk about.
Oh,
and so that's a little intimidating when you bring in a tough topic. And so that's where that's at.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, let's talk about audience preparation a little bit later, but I think you raise a really good point, right? Which is how that's you showing respect for your audience, right?
Right.
You're saying, I think I have something of value, and it's not even that I think that the audience isn't going to be with me, but I want to choose my words, and I want to make sure that what I'm sharing with them is something that's not going to be scary. That, I think, is very, very manageable. That's very manageable. That's word choice, and that's boundaries, right? That's creating boundaries.
Right.
Virtually, I mean, I can't honestly, and I won't go into my personal storytelling right now, but I think there are very few stories that you cannot tell as long as you've kind of gated it appropriately. So let's talk about that more, Annette. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Julie, did you want to go next?
Sure. I think what we shared relates to what you were just talking about with your mom, in that we all kind of felt that when we were having a positive impact, when we could see the positive impact on the groups we were speaking to, and because we were sharing some part of our lived experience. And so I think like making that connection and knowing that we were helping in a way, and that was kind of built confidence and made all of us feel good. And Fontaine and Mary, if you want to add to that.
I love that.
No, you
Who?
said it great.
Fontaine and Mary?
Yeah, this is Fontaine. No, I was saying she said it great. I think now we realize like why we felt good in that moment is because we felt like we were connecting. We felt like we were making a difference
Mhm.
to the audience we were speaking to. And I didn't know if the assignment was to be about public speaking, but all of us were talking about our, we felt our best selves, and it was basically when we were public speaking, which was interesting. But I don't know if that was
Oh,
the assignment or
yeah,
yeah,
I think it's however you interpreted it. I think
yeah,
the intention was to think about your best self in general, right?
right,
Just some people feel like their best self first thing in the morning when they take a run. Some people when they, are doing something good for their kids. Some people, in our group, we had somebody who had an example from, giving water to fellow soldiers in East Timor, relocating an entire, multi-thousand person class after a tornado, 3 hours after a tornado. I mean, we had some really, really powerful examples. And for us, I think the common thread, which it sounds like here, is the sense of aligning an activity with your core values, right? So when you're doing something that is helping you live your core values, that's where you start to feel your best self. And so to add to that, I wanted to ask, as people were talking about how they were talking, or just any patterns as people were talking. And I'm sorry, Margaret, I see your hand is raised too. Did you want to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to say, we found out best selves when we are helping others.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's not really a surprise, right, that a lot of people who would be in this cohort would also find their best self in acts of service to others, right? That's definitely a common thread among all of you. So I think that's really beautiful that you have that in common. So one thing that I noticed, and please let me know if you noticed this too, is that when people were speaking, they didn't have filler words. They were speaking in a very authentic and very passionate way. They were speaking like public speakers, right? What we think of, what we've talked about as being really great public speakers, a sense of humor, a sense of authenticity, connection, all of that came out when people were talking about their best self, because they're talking about something that they were passionate about, that they, felt strongly about, and they were also accessing their memory of something, right? So it's like if you're at brunch with somebody, or if you're catching up with a friend and you're talking about something that happened, you're just relying on your memory. So you're not, conjuring up something that you have to, put together in the moment. You're just saying, oh, this is a thing that happened, and I just have to remember the beats of what happened, right? If you're telling somebody about how you get to work, or, the last trip you took, you kind of are going back into your memory to access that. And, as you're remembering it, your feelings come up, right? And so that's an aspect of public speaking and storytelling that can be really powerful, is experiencing something that's so meaningful that it becomes part of your memory. And so you're accessing it. So you're not reciting, right? You're telling, you're sharing, you're not reciting. So somebody had mentioned preparing note cards. All of that is really important. Practice is an important part of storytelling and public speaking. But let's get into the presentation again and talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can prepare, and why recitation and sharing are different things, and why it's important to keep them separate. So again, I apologize that I am going to try to open up my, okay, so I'm presenting, right? Does anybody see PowerPoint or no?
It's showing a white screen.
Showing a white, gotcha.
Now we see all of us on Teams.
Oh, great. So beautiful faces, so that's good. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to try sharing again, because it said that it already has my PowerPoint on there. I can't re-upload it. Janet, I apologize. Is it possible for you to bring up the slide deck?
Let's see here. We're gonna do this.
Anything.
Y'all see all of my little team stuff, right? Now do you see it?
Yes, perfect,
Okay,
perfect. Okay,
great.
thank you so much.
And then what
Thank
slide are we on?
I think if you go to, there's a slide that says mindset. Oh, best self, excuse me, thank you. Okay, so after the best
This
self.
one? Uh-huh.
Oh, sorry, it's kind of hovering in and out.
Is it this one?
I don't think we're able to see them. I'm seeing a couple comments. Excuse me, I'm not able to see it either. Hold
I
on.
was seeing it.
No, she had
I
it
was
up.
seeing
It
this
was
one.
up. Janet, you had it up.
Yeah, it's
I
a flip.
did. Oh, okay. Stand by.
So,
all right, how about now?
Yeah, it's sticky notes
Yeah.
on a cork board. That's what I see.
yes, now they're up. Perfect. Thank you. All right, awesome. So the idea here with this slide is we're talking about different ways that we can either evoke our best self or conjure our best self. So I think of this as a list of resources, right? As you go on your public speaking journey, think about what are some of the ways, because, you know, some of the things that we were talking about, like the impossibility of moving an entire commencement, you know, a couple miles away after a tornado, that's not something, hopefully, that happens regularly, right? So what are some ways that we can conjure our best self regularly? For some people, it may be volunteering regularly. It may be spending time with your family. It may be going for a run. So what are those resources that you can access? That's what those sticky notes are about. For me, sometimes watching other people give speeches is really powerful and really inspiring. And then also journaling. So in particular, if you have these moments that make a great story or that inspire you, go ahead and write it down and think about, you know, what empowered you in that moment. Was it, you know, I did something I never thought I could do before, or I, you know, was able to see the faces of people that I helped, and I could see that I had quenched their thirst, or I, you know, made them more comfortable in some way, right? So journaling can also help evoke those feelings of your best self, that confidence. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, if you don't mind. And this is, again, kind of going back to what Annette had brought up, which is talking about how we reframe our experience with our audience. When we go with people, you know, the temptation can be, you know, thinking about what they're thinking of you, or you know, other negative thoughts that may come in. But if you reframe opportunity, this is an invitation that your audience is giving for you to connect with them, right? They're sitting there, they're primed to listen to you, you know, and even if you're having a difficult conversation, you are in control of that conversation, right? And they are there because they're hoping to get something positive, right? So if you can try to reframe it as, you know, having those common values, having, you know, something to deliver of value to the audience, that can help with some of the nervousness too. Let's talk about the next slide, where now we'll get into kind of content and delivery. Because I know that for a lot of women, and I say women in particular because I think so many of us have had that experience of being told that our voice is wrong, or, you know, maybe not even having an opportunity to practice public speaking because sometimes we just have not been given that professional development opportunity. So sometimes that practice, we need to give ourselves that opportunity. So let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit about what I mean when I say that your voice is an orchestra. So when you practice, and we'll talk a little bit more about practice in a moment, I want you to think about all the different ways that you can bring your best self and your public speaking self out. The first thing I want you to think about is utilizing your phone or your computer to record yourself. And just record your voice, don't record your physical aspects at all. Just record your voice and, you know, tell yourself a story that you've told 1,000 times. You know, tell a story about, you know, how you met your best friend, or tell a story of the best trip you ever took, or tell a story about the worst trip you ever took, you know, whatever you want to tell, whatever you can share in a few minutes, try to share that and then listen to what you sound like and make some observations. Is there a cadence that you occupy? There's some people in the survey who said that they talk too fast. Are you sure that you talk too fast, or does it just feel like you talk too fast in your mind because you're so used to feeling like you're taking up too much room, right? So there can be the perception that you're talking too fast, and then actually observing how you speak. think about, as you're telling that story, are there ways that you can change up your sentences? Something that some speakers do that I like to observe and advise other people to do too is vary the length of your sentences or give yourself some deliberate pauses. It's never a bad idea to slow things down. Slowing things down helps to kind of hone the audience's attention because you're putting them in a point of anticipation, right? If we have that gap, like the gap just now, we're waiting for me to say the next thing. So you're deliberately drawing your audience's attention back in to you, right? So varying the length of your sentences, varying the tone of your sentences, right? Sometimes we speak really melodically, and overusing melodic words can be a little bit grating as well, right? And that's a very different form of speaking than kind of that newscaster speak where we all sort of know and we can, tell what the inflections are going to be before we actually hear them. So listen to your speech patterns, listen to your pace, listen to your inflections, and then take a look at, or take a listen rather, to maybe phrases that you use or overuse, or the pauses or the ways that you fill. We use filler because we're uncomfortable with the silence, right? We think that somebody else is going to get bored as we're talking. But particularly if you're the only person speaking, those gaps are not observable by the audience if you make them deliberate. And one of the ways that you can make them deliberate is to kind of lean into the gap, right? And not feel the awkwardness, because now you're making that a strategy, right? You're making that a tactic. And another way that you can sort of get rid of the filler words is think about the words that you use a lot or the phrases that you use a lot. I tend to go for like or right or and be okay with a couple of them. That's just part of how you speak. But if you feel them coming on, just try to replace it with either a gap or a pause, or with maybe something else, maybe another phrase, or just end your sentence a little bit differently. So take a second to give yourself that storytelling moment, record yourself and make those observations, and then try it again and tell the story again. Maybe add some new details, maybe add some new color, and listen to how that changes and whether or not it feels more interesting to you and feels more authentic. And somebody said, replace with a breath or a pregnant pause. I like that too, absolutely. Replace with a breath. When we're speaking, and breath, I think, is a very good point, right? When we're speaking, sometimes we almost get ahead of ourselves, and reminding yourself to breathe is never a bad idea. So that's a very good suggestion. Let's take a look at the next slide and talk a little bit about ways that we can sound more natural and unrehearsed. So this is what we were talking about with when the note cards were brought up. When we rely on things like note cards, that can be a really good way to get our story down. One of the ways that we can make sure that we don't miss anything. But when we rely too much on note cards, we turn our story, or we turn our speech into a recitation as opposed to a conversation, right? We want to have a conversation with our audience, and that means that having something natural, right? I never remember or recite what I'm going to say, because I know with a group like this, we're going to have a lot of different inputs. We're going to have a lot of discussions back and forth. And so I don't want to commit to something that I know I'm going to go, kind of off script with, right? So with this kind of formula, the idea here is go ahead and sound, kind of unnatural, or excuse me, sound kind of natural and unrehearsed. And, like I said, go ahead and record yourself on a phone. But then you might start sounding a little bit more robotic, because now you are rehearsing a bit more, right? Now you've got the beats. Now I'm going to talk about when I went overseas, and then I missed my cab, and then I had to go stay in the bad hotel, and then I met this really cool guy at the bad hotel, and the guy introduced me to these cool, so all the different beats, right? That's going to start sounding robotic. But as you start to practice more and more with your story, and it becomes a memory for you, then it's just you going back into your memory, and you're just having a conversation, right? So this is a way for you to, take your note cards or whatever sort of rehearsal format you like. Some people like voice to text, which is another way you might want to explore the rehearsal space. If you don't like writing things down, just go ahead and say it out loud, voice to text, and then try it over and over again and keep making edits. and then absorb it to the point where it is a conversation. It's just something that you can share and you're not using the exact same words over and over again, even if you are hitting the same beats. Okay. Did somebody have I thought I saw a hand raise. I'm sorry, Annette, has your hand just been up? I'm sorry if I missed that.
Maybe I just didn't take it down. I apologize.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then the last piece of this is, in the survey, what came up a couple times was the sense of how do I recover? Well, recovery really only becomes relevant if you're on a script and you're trying to remember where you were on the script. But if I'm asking you to, kind of conjure up a memory, you're not really going off script. You're not really recovering because all you're doing is you're going back into the story that you know by heart, right? If somebody were to ask me, about how I met my husband, then, I would probably have to go back in my memory bank a little bit, but I would be able to tell you all of the different beats, right? I would be able to tell you about, the really good date, the really bad date, the really, really good date, right? So we'd be able to kind of go back into the memory, and I wouldn't be off script because there's no script, if that makes sense. I want to pause here for a second because I've been talking for a while and see if anybody has any questions or any thoughts. I've seen a couple of good suggestions come up. I think somebody had brought up Barack Obama and his way of speaking, which does include a lot of pauses. I think he's such a phenomenal example. I think that another example is, we brought up Michelle Obama, and one of the things that she does really, really well is, she's able to add a lot of humor and lightheartedness to her speech. And I think the way that she does that is she's not even necessarily telling jokes, but it's just the tone with which she speaks, right? That she's able to kind of make people in the audience feel like they're her friends, that they're her, warm colleagues, right? And I think that's something that's also really powerful, is just being able to use that tone of warmth and transparency. Okay, does anybody have any questions about what we've talked about so far? Okay, so let's go ahead to the next slide. Okay, when we talk about public speaking, I wanted to just introduce this slide very quickly because this is what we were talking about with Annette regarding some level of boundaries, and we'll talk more about boundaries in the next section. But here, we're going to talk a little bit about what are elements of storytelling. So almost every story is going to have each of these elements. And when you're thinking about the content of your story or the content of your speech, as you're recording yourself and listening back, if you feel like your voice is fine and all of that is working well, which I'm sure it is, sometimes what we need to work on is the content. And there are ways to make content more interesting by enhancing your character, making your setting a little bit more clear, including the motivation, raising the stakes of what's going on in the story, talking about a turning point, right? What was the moment at which a decision was made or where something dramatic happened to change or alter the outcome, and then what ended up happening. So for example, I think it was Marina who was talking about working in East Timor, and that being one of the scenes of her feeling her best self. And so she gave us a little bit of the setting, right? That, a lot of us are not familiar with East Timor, or even if we are, sometimes it's nice to just kind of have that setting set for us. So as you're telling a story, making sure that people have a sense of what's going on, particularly if it's a story that's maybe in the distant past or in an area that might be unfamiliar to your audience. So what you're doing with all of these elements is you're tweaking them so that you're giving the audience a bit more of a connection to what you're talking about, right? The more unfamiliar something is, the more somebody is going to feel that distance. So you can close that distance by tweaking these elements. Okay. Any questions about this? And I'm happy to, send the slide out if this is helpful. Okay. So let's go ahead and head to the next slide. Okay. So this is, oh, Annette, I'm sorry, you're not able to see any of the slides. Let me see if I can share, because at this point, I think I should be able to hopefully do something. Let me see if I can share my screen. Are you guys able to see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, do you see something that says Nova Science Now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I think you need to, oh, there we go.
Yeah, all right. I am going to, let's all cross our fingers, okay, and hope that this works.
Okay.
All right. Do we hear the sound?
Yes. That's good.
I grew up in the 60s. I lived on the south side of Chicago. And I was a young girl who loved to stare up at the stars. I imagined myself going there. I studied all the things about the Apollo program, what mission was going to take place when. I decided to go to medical school because I wanted to do. While I was in medical school, I had the opportunity refugee camp. I went on in Cuba, East Africa, but I still wanted to go into space. So I applied. I picked up the phone. I called down to Johnson Space Center. I said, I would like an application. They didn't laugh. I turned in the application. There may be a certain naivete when I say, when I applied to the astronaut program, I didn't even think about space or anything like that. It didn't even cross my, I wanted to go into space. But if there had been 1,000 people in space before me, or whether there had been none, I wanted to go. I thought it was important to take to space with me things that represented people who, so I took a poster forming the dance cry. I took up a Bundu statue, which was for the Women's Society in West Africa. I took up a flag for the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, the oldest African sorority in the, because they hadn't been included. And I thought that was an important thing to do. For me, the experience was one that made me feel very connected. I felt that my being was as much a part of this universe. It helped me to recognize that right now we're in space. This Earth is part of that universe. That was my grand connection. And then I looked down and I saw Chicago. I thought about the little girl who had assumed she would go into space. What would my younger self have thought? And I think she would have been tickled.
All right, I'm glad that worked. Was everybody able to see that and hear that? Great. All right, let's take a moment. How do we feel about Mae Jemison and that lovely speech? All right, I'm going to start.
I think it was pretty.
Yes. Yes, please.
I think it was pretty amazing the way that she said that she just knew what she wanted to do. She didn't care if she was the first, the second, or the 100th.
Mm-hmm.
But when she did accomplish it and was able to do it, that she took the time to think about and, you know, do the research or whatever on underrepresented groups, so they would be included and they could go to space.
Absolutely. Yes.
That kind of resonated with me, and the way that she just told her story, I mean, we only heard a few minutes of it, but it just kind of drew you in. Mm-hmm. And like on the chat, I had stopped what I was doing, watching, and said, oh, wow. Because I could sit there probably and listen to her for an hour or two without an issue.
That is so, I think that's so powerful. What a great compliment to her. I mean, I think, you know, you're talking about the content and how passionate she was about what she wanted to do. But you're right. I think she's also very compelling to listen to. That's great. So thank you for that feedback. Does anybody else want to share? Sorry, I'm trying to look at the chat as well. Oh, Julie said, my heart was happy listening to her. That's so lovely. And Ayana, you said it didn't seem like a speech. It was like she was sharing with a friend. Ayana, I would love to hear you expound on that a little bit. Do you mind?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it was just very natural. It didn't seem forced. I felt that she was just explaining how she felt.
Absolutely. I love how there's a moment where she says, I don't even care, I didn't even care how I, got there. I mean, I think there's a sense of, she's an astronaut, she's beloved, she's obviously very, very brilliant to be able to have gone through this program. But at the end of the day, she just sounds so approachable and so friendly. And, all of these accolades and her historical accomplishment, it's definitely a part of her. But at the end of the day, she's a person and so likable. And I think that really, really comes across. And Annette, you said, I always enjoy when somebody speaks from the heart. I think that's exactly right. It's that she really was speaking from the heart. Does anybody else want to share?
I'd like to share.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that was the comfort that she seemed to have with speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Was like disconnected from the little girl in her that was in awe of that. And
can you share? Tell me more about what that means. That's really interesting.
She's young as an astronaut. She was young when she was doing all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So the little her who first saw that, the belief in her, first, the 100th, she just saw herself
mm-hmm.
on that, playing that role. And it's like that little girl never gave up seeing that as a possibility. That's what I got out of it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And isn't that so universal, right? Don't we all have that child within who is rooting for us as adults, right? And I think you're right. That really came through. That she was, she really made her younger self proud, and is deeply, deeply inspiring. I'm sorry that there's a little bit of sound coming in and out, so I'm hoping that I got your point.
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you, Ursula, for contributing. That's wonderful. So I wanted to give us just maybe a 5-minute break because I know we're for about an hour. But right before that, Fontaine, I wanted to answer your question. What's going on, Fontaine?
Oh, sorry, I didn't know you were gonna do a break, but
Right, yeah.
I was just gonna comment as well that you know, her starting off talking about being a little girl looking into space, and then her ending with her looking down at Chicago and thinking about that little girl. So it kind of like she did that, you know, connecting
Mhm.
when she was like ending her story, which, you know, was really good.
Almost like she could see herself, right?
Yeah,
Beautiful.
or like that storytelling method that you connect, you know,
Mhm.
you circle back to what you talked about in the beginning. Maybe that was part of it.
Absolutely. You know, that's a very good point. Like content-wise, so I wasn't picking up on what you're saying. Content-wise, yes, that was a moment that she introduced something at the beginning of her speech and then referred back to it. No one has ever mentioned that before, by the way.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that full circle moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Fontaine. I appreciate that. Well, that's a wonderful note to end, and go on a break for. Let's take 5 minutes. It's 8:17 on my clock. If we can come back at 8:22, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sticking with us. We've got a bit more and then some, at least one more group discussion, excuse me, a small group discussion. So at 8:22, if you can come back and we'll get into small groups and have a discussion, I appreciate that. All right, thanks everybody. Okay, folks, if we can start coming back together, that would be great. I think we wanted to try to do at least one more discussion. I know there are a few people who are not able to be sorted into rooms, but we're going to try again. Just make sure. So, Janet, do you know if is there any way that I can help with the room sorting? I just don't have I'm just not seeing the function.
Well, I don't know that you can. I was doing some working on it while we were on our break.
Oh, okay.
But there may still be some folks who remain in the main room. But I did assign manually a few folks, so we can give it a try, Ratisha.
All right.
5 minutes again, Ratisha.
Yes. So if everybody is back, what I'd like to do is why you think for you personally it's important to share this particular story or speech.
When you did your breakout rooms, Trisha
Kicked
just said
out
she
of
got
teams
kicked and all together. Yep. It was a couple people. Rachel got kicked, Morgan got kicked, Trisha got kicked.
Okay. I hope that they come back soon. I hope that they come back soon, back into the space. I have no answers for why that happened, but I do appreciate you letting me know what's going on, so at least I can be on the lookout for our waiting room and for our participants. Oh goodness, I don't know what's going on. Morgan just messaged everyone too. I will remain on the lookout for all of our folks that just got kicked out. So do you all want to use?
I don't see why not. I mean, it looks like it's the same people as last, and a few other ladies.
And we had this issue, didn't we, Marina, in the last meeting as well? We've never.
Yep.
None of us could get moved into room. I don't know what that was.
I don't know if it's a cell phone thing or what. But I already talked and you already talked. I feel like some of the other people with it, if they want to talk, I'm.
Do that.
Yeah, so this is Sarome. Last time I was on my computer and I still wasn't into a breakout room. Hello?
Jerome, you have any thoughts about
Oh yeah, we heard you.
Okay.
what you're excited about you're anticipating in your story?
Yeah, so I'm excited about my pitch, because we're talking about our pitch for cause, right? Like our story. Is that what we're talking about? Yeah, because it's something that's very personal to me. From the main theme of being in WVLF is the idea of the transition from the Army and being separated and isolated and not having the the resources to support women veterans. And I think it would be a good thing for me to pitch this cause so that other ladies can actually to call to action of the I'm sorry, I was doing something to call to action of the ladies to for my cause. And pretty much what it is to kind of reach out and sources for yourself versus just waiting for it to fall on your lap. And that was my biggest issue, which is I didn't know how it, and I was just waiting and waiting. And finally, you know, I, I found this, and kind of gave me, actually it didn't kind of, it gave me the confidence to be proud of my as a woman veteran. And so I'm pretty excited about that action. Did you guys hear me?
Great job. Hey, ladies. Sorry, I'm in Detroit. I'm leaving the Tigers game and about to get on Uber, but I just wanted to pop in real quick and share a little insight. I am so nervous about doing this pitch and um, giving my skills because this isn't my thing. But listening to you all talk, I'm building a little confidence. I'm a little empowered to go into DC and knock this thing out of the park. But y'all, I gotta admit, I am nervous as heck. When she said no cards, I was like, oh shit. Like that's exactly what I was gonna do, like be a robot and read my note cards. So now I gotta revamp my whole thing, and I think what I'm just gonna do is just speak from my heart because I think I do better when I just speak from my heart and the things that inspire me, like instead of just kind of programming myself to what I think people want to hear. So I'm looking forward to stepping outside of my comfort zone. And one of the things that just has really been resonating with me since we started this program is leaning into discomfort. And so I'm really trying to do that. And it hasn't been easy, but I'm excited for the growth that I know I'm going to achieve after this. So I just want to say, get on the people mover.
And circle back to the not a lot.
Janet, Trisha's wondering about the note card.
And there it is.
Oh,
You want to say that again?
No, I was saying, Janet's still on saying that you were asking about the no note card thing.
Oh, we're back.
Hi, everybody. Hey, Amber, can I just apologize? I don't think I don't think I managed the room very well, and so I didn't get to hear you speak at all. So I'm very sorry about that. Would you be willing to share your excitement about public speaking in the larger forum?
So for me personally, I feel like especially, well, not personally, because it's about all women, right? We are all looking to be heard. And I think it's very important that, whatever we're passionate about, that we, especially those of us who have self-identified and stepped into leadership roles, lead the way and demonstrate the importance of the female voice and perspective. Listening to Genevieve, that was a great example. And it's an interesting segue because we go from talking about, making crime or making
making sure that crime is being held accountable. And I brought the counterpoint of the homelessness population and how petty theft is usually caused due to the fact that we're not having our basic needs met. And so what I am going to be speaking about in my presentation, and it sounds really ridiculous, but it's going to be can openers. As somebody who is recently experiencing homelessness, my first month of being homeless, I had plenty of donated canned foods, but I didn't have a can opener. And that's something that a basic need that people really don't think about when they're donating and when they're providing basic goods to people who are newly experiencing homelessness. So, I mean, if I was hungry enough, I may have stolen a can opener just so that I could feed myself. And then, you know, going back to Genevieve's talking points, it's like, then I might have found myself in court for petty theft. And then my whole life would be more difficult to get back online just because I was just trying to survive.
Amber, I don't think really about what you just said. That is, I mean, my mind was just blown. I mean, you literally, I just feel so, I feel like a better person for having what you just said, you know? It is really important. It's really important for us to know the ways in which we give, that they should be meaningful, right? That we can't just do the canned food drive and say, well, all right, I solved homelessness, right? And then we didn't actually give people what they needed, right? And that we didn't actually solve the problem. And what you brought up, I think, is also really important to talk about in the room. You know, when we were talking to Genevieve, and I want to let Genevieve speak to this, I thought we had such a wonderful moment where, you know, Genevieve brought up her cause, and Amber, you gave a really great, thoughtful pushback. And again, I could not believe what happened in the room. Well, you listened to each other. And so, Genevieve, do you mind talking about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, no problem. It was my response when Amber had brought up her response on the homelessness and the necessity to steal or basic needs being met, is that I didn't think about that perspective. And so I'm excited to speak on my topic, but now I have a chance to really dive to a different perspective and a different problem and how that's going to affect the way I come off when I do make my speech, because now I have even more schema around it. And so that's something that I'm really grateful. I like that because now I'm going to go dig into that and see how I can incorporate that into what I say.
Absolutely. Amber, I think you did a wonderful job of advocating for yourself, advocating for a group of very marginalized people who otherwise would not have that voice heard. And Genevieve, I think you received it really well. I think you really represented what this whole seminar is about, right? That we're trying to use public speaking as a way to advance a cause, and we may not have all of the answers, right? But that this is a way to start the conversation and acknowledge that, you know, there's more work to be done, right? This is the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it. And you both, I think, really embodied that very beautifully. So thank you for doing that. It sounds like somebody had a question. I want to get to that, but I also want to hear, did anyone else have some interesting moments of, you know, where people were passionate, any causes that people wanted to?
I'll say something.
Yes, please.
I am excited to become comfortable with public speaking. I feel like I have a lot of things to say. And so a lot of people are always like, you need to be telling more people about this and that and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm just like so scared. So I am excited to like gain that strength and then like essentially move on and not only help myself, but help others. Cause like that's what I'm a servant, as we all are. I'm excited to finally be able to do that confidently.
Yeah. I really appreciate how much this team recognizes the link between public service and public speaking. I really appreciate that. It sounded like at least one person leave that unaddressed. Was it Trisha?
I just had a comment in regards to what Amber and Genevieve said.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't in the room with them, so I don't know what Genevieve's pitch is. But coming from where Amber was at, I've done homeless outreach for the last, 8-9 months. But the first thing that I did when I started doing homeless outreach was say, hey, we need to get some P38s, this, that, and everything else. And they looked at me on fire because I've always been told when I go outreach, it's great to be able to go to the food bank, but how do we open the cans? So when I would go out with my bag with the personal hygiene sets and things like that, and the water and the dog food in it, I went on Amazon and ordered like 100 P38s. So that was in every Ziploc, and I would carry, a pack of them on my backpack also just to hand out. So they're not really expensive. And the fact that Amber just kind of validated where my head was at back then, and that everybody looked at me like I was crazy. Thank you, Amber. And I'll have a whole bunch of P38s when we go to DC if you'd like them, just in case.
There you go.
I carry a keychain for when I go camping or when I'm out and about. If somebody needs one, I just give them out.
Well, I am deeply touched and impressed with the level of empathy of everybody who's on this call. I think in terms of the stories that you've told of the past good works that you've done and what you think about the good and dignity of the people around you, very inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. All right, I think I have the slides up. Can everybody see the quote from Mae Jemison here? Once I got into space, I was feeling very
see it.
Wonderful. I was feeling very comfortable in the universe. I felt like I had a right to be anywhere in this universe, that I belonged here as much as any speck of stardust, any comet, any planet. Let's talk about speaking as a full body experience, and let's talk about boundaries, okay? So some of us were talking about stories that may be difficult to tell. Not everybody's going to have a story that'll be lighthearted, or even lighthearted stories can have moments that can be to share. So as you practice, as you record yourself on your phone or record yourself in the mirror, I want you to take a moment and feel your body and how you're reacting to your story. Sometimes as we get to the difficult parts, we can feel our eyes start to react. They can get watery. Our chest can feel tight. We just start to feel those kind of defensive or kind of reactions. Can we make sure that for anybody who's not asking a question, can we try to make sure that our speakers are muted? Or mics are muted?
I think Janet needs to do it. It's Ayana. I can see the microphone going off, and it's making a really weird noise whenever she says something. It sounds like
a very creepy noise.
Yes, everybody was hearing it too, right?
Hallucination.
I thought it was just me. Okay.
So, okay, thank you so much for it sounds like the noise is gone, which is wonderful. So thank you. So when we talk about practicing our speech and the bodily part of it, physicality of it, again, think about how you're feeling as you're speaking. Also think a little bit about how you tend to hold yourself. There's some speakers who, when they speak, they like to pace the stage. They like to take up a lot of space. There's some people who literally will sit on a stool and they kind of like to compress themselves. There's no wrong way. There's no right way. There's no wrong way to hold yourself physically when you're speaking. I would say kind of leaning on a podium or having something that's obstructing you is probably not the best way to go. But other than that, kind of having your body be free, I think is very positive. Just think a little bit about how you feel comfortable holding yourself. As you practice, if you can record yourself physically, you can look at what your hands, some people like to really power pose, which is sort of interesting. Some people like to throw their hands around. Sometimes holding your hand or feeling very deliberate with your hands, using them to gesture for something that is, specifically meant to draw attention to a particular point, that can also be useful. So as you practice and you kind of get out of the uncanny valley back into, the story or telling something from your memory, then you can associate those motions with points in your story. And it looks like somebody had a question about trigger warnings. So I think it really depends on the venue. It really depends who and what your audience is and what your topic is. I think that I have personally never used a trigger warning, and I've spoken about some things that are pretty difficult. But the reason that I haven't used trigger warnings, I think, is because I tend to not include the detail that tends to be triggering. So, for example, you know, I don't want to bring up any topics that are going to be, but let's say that there's something that is, you know, in your history and it involves an act of violence, right? You know, there's a way to talk about the act of violence where you talk about the effects of the acts of violence, and then there's a way to talk about it where you're discussing the details. I've never found it necessary to talk about details. I've only ever found it necessary to talk about the impact and to talk about the sort of the resolution, right? It is important to talk about the difficult part, right? That like there are stakes involved. There's, you know, the overcoming and the triumph happened because something really bad happened. But the way in which we frame that thing can be mitigated somewhat by using language that's deliberate and careful. And that, again, I think comes from practice. I would leave it up to you. Another reason I don't use trigger warnings is because, and this is going to maybe sound a little bit silly, I find trigger warnings themselves can be a little bit triggering, where it's kind of like if we're already saying the thing, now it's out there, right? Like content warning may include X, Y, Z. Okay, so I know that's coming, and it didn't necessarily make me feel any better or worse about the topic. What really makes me feel better about the topic is knowing that the person who has taken enough care to and guard me against excessive and unnecessary verbal brutality. Okay. So what are some ways we can do that? Some of that is by listening and feeling your own reactions, right? If you're reacting to something, if you're feeling a, you know, strong physical reaction to what you're talking about, you probably want to fence that off, and you probably want to create a little bit of distance in the sense of, you know, I'm not going to go into that detail, or I'm not going to, you know, talk about that with, you know, that level of specificity, right? I'll make a reference to something happened, or I might even say, you know, that something to just ensure that there's an acknowledgement that, but then I would be very, very careful about the ways in which I frame it. Were there some, I'm more than happy to ask questions about it. I'm sorry, I'm missing the, do you see, is it Trisha? Yeah, Trisha and Morgan.
Yes, it's I'm the
No,
problem.
no,
It's
sorry.
me. Here's mine is that I was always told that you needed to have a hook, like a hook, a thesis. What I'm getting out there is that I have found sometimes while I was still active, or when I got into advocating as a civilian, there were certain times that I was in classes or training or whatever, and people weren't able to put a face with what was going on. And as it was for me to share my story, I that sometimes sharing your story, as hard as it can help so many other people just by them hearing, oh my God, I can identify with that, or I've been there. And so that's what I'm saying is my pitch is going to have some of those things in it because I think they're necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think with us being in a group of veterans that more than a few of us have had the same stories.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, it's hard as me to tell it. It seems like even working with clients when I was a detention advocate, when they were little by little sharing their stories, and it somehow circled around back to me about like, do you have any experience with this or anything like that?
Mm-hmm.
And when I would tell my story, they were like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
we have so many similar lived situations.
Absolutely. So let me talk about that then. So let's say that you're talking for 5 minutes, right? And even in what you just said in that frame, I think that almost everybody on the call has a sense of what you're talking about, right? So there's already a bit of a shorthand where we don't necessarily need to spend, in a 5-minute speech, we don't need to spend 2 or 3 minutes talking about the incidents that happened, right? The violence, the difficulty, the trauma, right? The trauma should not be the overarching point of the story, right? So there's a way to about the trauma. There's a way to refer to that universal that doesn't take up the entire, right? That doesn't have to, take up all of the room story, because what I would imagine is that really the arc of your story is about what you did after, right? The ways in which you either recovered or you found a group of people who helped you recover, right? To me, I would imagine that the story or the public speaking is about, maybe that the recovery didn't happen and this is what should have happened. This thing that happened that was horrible, that was adversity, was, it hurt you and it hurts other people. And this is the way it needs to be addressed, right? And that's why I want us to do this. I need you to sign this petition. I need you to come and walk with me. I need you to hold my hand through this thing. I know you've been through it. I'm here with you too, right? That is story to me, right? So that to me is where I would spend the energy, right? So I know how difficult this is. I feel it. I see it. I see it. Okay. Believe me when I say that what you've been through, but I know what it means to talk about something that hurts your heart and that could hurt other people. Okay. And I am telling you, there are ways that you can talk about it that will not hurt you. At the end of this, we're going to put in a link, feedback, and more questions. So if you feel like you have more questions or specific questions, please email me, please put it in the feedback, and let's continue this conversation. Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So Morgan.
Yeah, it was also on the trigger warning topic, but if we need to keep going, that's fine.
No, it's total. I don't want to tell anybody not to do a trigger warning. Absolutely not. But what I'm saying is that a trigger warning is, the point of a trigger warning is to help create a safe environment for your audience.
Yeah.
And I think there are other ways to do that as well, but please use your judgment. Okay. All right. These are very, very good questions, and please don't feel like we don't have time for them. Okay. I really want to say how much I appreciate your honesty and feedback, everybody. Okay. The next piece I wanted to talk about was, again, a lot of us just don't have daily practice, right? We don't often get to hear our own voice unless we're, talking to a family member or, doing something like grocery shopping or something mundane. So I want you to take as many opportunities as you can to speak and to build your practice. So, speak up about something, record yourself speaking on the phone, just talking away, right? Just get used to the sound of your own voice so that it doesn't sound, alien to you. Singing, but just again, kind of like falling in love, really powerful. Let's talk a little bit about some exercise. It looks like somebody said someone's reading pitches. What's happening?
This is Lisa. I am one of the alumni leaders. All I was saying is that Crystal and I will be reading the pitches before they are presented in DC. So we'll have an opportunity to give feedback as necessary. So the need for a trigger warning, we will make that determination when we read the pitches. So
Perfect.
No need to, yes. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Lisa, I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, that's wonderful. All right, so 2 exercises that you can do where you can get that practice, that out loud practice, listening to your cadence, practicing how to utilize your voice in different ways. So we already talked about recording phone, but what are some things that you can record? So again, talk about part of your day or your week. You can talk about something that happened in the news that you have an opinion on. Particularly, I think if there's something that you might find relevant to your cause or the topic that you wanted to discuss, or even just talk about a funny anecdote, right? Like, what is your favorite anecdote to tell a new person or a new friend or at a party? When you're talking among your cohort, what's something you like to share about yourself? So just try recording that and listen to yourself, and particularly something that enlivens you or makes you feel lighthearted. It might be particularly fun to listen to. And then the second exercise is, this is something that might just be useful for you as you're transitioning into new environments, creating a video resume. So sit with your laptop, put yourself against a neutral background, and talk about yourself for maybe 1 minute, for 5 minutes, and think about that as something that you can use as an artifact to introduce yourself to new people and get yourself maybe acclimated into new environments. Okay, so think about that as well. All right, I apologize that we're running out of time a little bit. I'd like you to take this question with you as you talk about yourself and think about yourself. What are some elements of your personal style? And think about how that might translate to you as a public speaker. Are you somebody who likes to dress sort of elegantly? Are you flamboyant? Are you boisterous? Are you somebody who tends to be a little bit more on the quiet and reserved side? Those are all that you can think about as you nurture your personal style and your public speaking style. Let's talk cross training. So it looks like the meeting is going to end in a few minutes, so I'm going to just rush through this a bit. Sometimes as we find inspiration, and somebody was talking about a hook, right? Hook. How do we become funnier, or how do we kind of incorporate turns of phrase? I found that using cross training, both in the form of different activities and also different forms of art, can actually inspire us to think about things in more interesting ways. So, for example, if you're telling a story about Steve Jobs, one thing that Steve Jobs did that was really interesting was he actually took calligraphy classes when he left Apple, sort of not by his choice. And when he was taking these calligraphy classes, what he did, he leveraged the fact that calligraphy is something that's really popular and beautiful, and he created fonts in computers, right? So he was able to kind of leverage this other experience to then impart it into what he was doing. So, maybe there's an anecdote that you feel is kind of interesting and may be relevant to the cause you're talking about, like the can openers, right? I think with Amber's discussion of can openers, that actually opens up this really interesting topic of how we're not serving the homeless the way that we probably should be as a society, right? So all of this exposure to other art and other activities can, open up our mind to things into our speech and can help us find that hook. Finally, I wanted to talk about Shirley Chisholm, just because I think she's a pretty interesting and very laudable character in history. And there's a movie that's coming out about her in a few, I think, months. I think it's filming right now. And what I love about her is just these fantastic turns of phrase, right? If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, right? So if you think of those turns of phrase as you're cross training, as you're, talking through your story, those turns of phrase are the anchor often audiences can hang their hat on, right? When they think about you and they think about that anchor, then they're able to kind of solidify your point and it becomes a bit stronger. So, from my perspective, you don't have to have a joke. You don't have to have a hook. You don't have to have those kinds of quotes. But if they occur to you, then find a way to weave it into your story so that it's a talking point that people can relate back to. Somebody idea that at the beginning of her story, she was a little girl looking up into space, and then as a young woman astronaut, she was looking back down, and that became a full circle moment. That's another technique that you can use, and I think was really wonderfully brought out. So I appreciate the person who brought that up. I think that was Fontaine. So thank you so much for your wonderful feedback and your participation. I learned so much every time I get to participate with a cohort. I learned so much today and really appreciate your feedback and your honesty and all of your great experience. So thank you for that. We have about a minute left. Does anybody else want to share anything? We can also, Janet, if you happen to have the link, I don't know, it may just make more sense to email it since we only have about a minute left. But yes, please, any comments or feedback, I'd be happy to hear it over email or in the chat.
Oh, hi, I'm sorry. This is Crystal. I'm just jumping in to thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you, Crystal.
I am feeling under the weather, so I'm sparing you from turning on my camera. But we will that feedback form Um, so we can get that to everyone and they can get that those questions answered. But thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time with us, because I think this could be something that we just talk about for 8 hours.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you for spending the time with me too. I really appreciate it. So we'll see you over email, and I look forward to your questions if you have any. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And thank you, Janet. Thank you so much. Oh,
yeah.
Janet, my hero.
Oh, no problem. I did the least of it all tonight. Thank
I missed something. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
you. You are amazing, Ratija.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, see you guys later. Have a good one.